June 4th, 1942. 5:30 a.m. The Pacific Ocean, north of Midway Atoll. The deck of the aircraft carrier, Akagi, trembles beneath your boots as engines roar to life. The humid morning air is already thick with fuel fumes and salt spray. You can hear the synchronized thunder of 14-cylinder radial engines as Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters warm up beside Aichi. 3AS and Nakajima B-5 nest their propellers, cutting the dawn into violent fragments. Flight deck crews move with mechanical precision. White-gloved directors wave flags. Mechanics crouch low, hands slick with oil. Pilots sit rigid in their cockpits, goggles lowered, waiting for the signal that will send them into history. Above it all, on the bridge of Akagi, stands Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commander of the 1st Air Fleet. His posture is rigid, composed, almost ceremonial. Around him, officers murmur calmly over charts and bearings. The operation unfolding below him is not considered risky. It is considered inevitable. Victory has already been decided. This is merely its execution. Months of uninterrupted triumph have hardened this belief into certainty. Since December, the Imperial Japanese Navy has swept across the Pacific with stunning precision. Pearl Harbor shattered American pride. The Philippines, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies fell in rapid succession. British warships sank beneath Japanese torpedoes. Every engagement has confirmed the same conclusion. The Americans are slow, disorganized, hesitant, and now Midway will be the final blow. You can hear the signal officer call out over the wind. Launch sequence begins. One by one, aircraft surge forward, engines screaming as they race across the deck. The carrier pitches slightly beneath the force of each takeoff. Wings lift. Wheels leave the deck. Machines vanish into the brightening sky. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida is not flying today, but his earlier role at Pearl Harbor echoes in every man here. The doctrine he helped prove still governs every decision. Strike first, strike hard, destroy the enemy before he can react. On Akagi's bridge, Captain Taijiro Aoki studies the horizon through binoculars. The sea is calm, deceptively peaceful. Visibility is excellent. There is no sign of American resistance, no smoke, no distant silhouettes, no radio chatter suggesting imminent threat. Nothing, one officer says quietly. Nagumo nods once. It is exactly as expected. To the north, the carriers, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, maintain their positions in perfect formation. 4 carriers, the core of Japan's naval air power, moving as a single unstoppable weapon. Together, they represent the most experienced and deadly carrier force in the world. Their air crews are veterans. Their coordination is unmatched. Their doctrine has never failed. Below-deck ordnance crews prepare additional bombs and torpedoes. You can hear the metallic clatter as weapons are hoisted and secured. Armorers check fuses, adjust settings, and stack munitions in precise rows. Everything is methodical, efficient, controlled. No one rushes. There is no urgency because there is no perceived danger. Far to the west, Vice Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto commands the broader operation aboard the battleship Yamato. His grand strategy depends on this moment. Draw the American fleet out, destroy its carriers, force a decisive engagement that will break American will. He has calculated every move. But here on Akagi, the reality feels even simpler. Midway will be bombed. The Americans will respond too late. Their carriers, if they appear at all, will be destroyed by superior Japanese air power. Then the Pacific will belong entirely to Japan. You can hear laughter from a group of junior officers near the communications station. One mentions the Americans' failure to protect Pearl Harbor. Another jokes about how quickly Midway will fall. There is no malice in it, only confidence. A quiet, shared understanding that this is a continuation of an already won war. Radio operators monitor frequencies. Static crackles softly. Occasional transmissions come through from the outgoing strike group. Reports are calm, organized. The first wave is approaching Midway. Then, at 6:20 a.m., the first message arrives. Enemy installations sighted. Commencing attack. The tone is routine, expected. You can almost feel the tension release across the bridge. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. Nagumo allows himself a brief moment of satisfaction. His carriers have struck first again. The Americans are being hit before they can react. It is Pearl Harbor repeated, but smaller, cleaner, more final. Minutes pass. The sea remains empty. The sky remains clear. And yet beneath this calm, something unseen is already moving. Far beyond the horizon, American forces are not where Japanese planners expected them to be. They are not scattered. They are not blind. They are waiting. On Akagi's bridge, there is no awareness of this, only certainty. At 7 a.m., reports from the strike force indicate that Midway is not yet neutralized. Anti-aircraft fire has been heavier than expected. Some installations remain intact. The message is clear. A second strike will be required. Nagumo considers this carefully. Doctrine demands flexibility, but it also demands decisiveness. His reserve aircraft, currently armed with anti-ship torpedoes, were prepared for an expected American naval response. But no American ships have been sighted. No carriers, no cruisers, nothing. The conclusion seems obvious. Rearm the reserve planes with land attack bombs. Finish Midway. Then deal with any American response afterward. Orders are given. Below deck, chaos begins to stir beneath the surface of discipline. Torpedoes are removed. Bombs are brought up. Fuel lines are reconnected. Aircraft are shifted, repositioned, prepared for a different mission. You can hear the change immediately. The calm rhythm becomes more complex, more crowded, still controlled but no longer simple. On the bridge, officers continue scanning the horizon. Still nothing. No enemy. No threat. Only open ocean. At this moment, every decision feels correct. Every assumption feels justified. Every past victory reinforces the belief that this operation will unfold exactly as intended. And yet just beyond sight, beyond radio. Clarity beyond the limits of what Nagumo can see or know, American carrier aircraft are already in the air. Searching, closing, minutes away from rewriting everything. But here on Akagi, as the morning sun rises higher, and the engines below deck continue to roar, no one believes that disaster is already approaching. No one believes that within hours, 4 carriers will be burning. No one believes that this moment of confidence is the last stable ground before collapse. The sun has climbed higher now, casting a harsh, unforgiving light across the decks of Akagi. Heat begins to radiate off the steel surfaces, mixing with the thick scent of aviation fuel and cordite. Below in the hangar decks, the air has grown heavier, more crowded, more volatile. You can feel the tempo shifting, not panic, not yet. But the smooth certainty of earlier has been replaced by something more complicated. At 7:15 a.m., a message arrives that does not fit neatly into expectations. A reconnaissance aircraft from the cruiser Tone has been delayed. Its launch had been late, its search pattern now incomplete. The delay itself seems minor, almost trivial in the scale of operations unfolding across hundreds of miles of ocean. But in war minutes carry weight. On the bridge, staff officers exchange brief glances. The search grid has a gap, a blind spot. It is acknowledged, noted, and then set aside. There is still no evidence of American carriers, no confirmed sightings. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo remains composed. He has seen nothing to suggest immediate danger. His doctrine remains intact. Finish Midway first. Below deck, the consequences of that decision deepen. You can hear shouted orders echoing through the confined steel corridors. Armorers are now handling live ordnance in tight spaces. Torpedoes that had been secured for anti-ship strikes are carefully removed. Bomb racks are adjusted. Fuses are recalibrated for land targets. Fuel hoses snake across the floor, pumping aviation gasoline into aircraft that are being repositioned again and again. This is no longer a simple preparation. This is transformation under pressure. Every movement increases risk. Every minute compounds it. At 7:28 a.m., another message arrives from Midway. Second attack required. It confirms what the first wave reported. The island is damaged but not destroyed. Airfields remain operational. Anti-aircraft defenses are still active. On the bridge, the logic appears undeniable. Complete the objective. Rearm the reserve aircraft for a second strike. There is still no confirmed sighting of American naval forces. To delay would be to leave Midway capable of launching further resistance. Nagumo gives the order to continue rearming, and so the hangar decks become even more congested. Bombs are stacked. Torpedoes are moved aside. Aircraft are partially fueled, partially armed, caught in the middle of a conversion. You can see the vulnerability forming, though no one names it yet. A carrier is most dangerous when its aircraft are armed, fueled, and ready for immediate launch. But it is also most vulnerable when that process is incomplete. At 7:40 a.m., the delayed reconnaissance plane from Tone finally transmits its first report. 10 enemy ships sighted. The words cut through the calm like a blade. On the bridge, every head turns toward the radio operator. 10 ships, not expected, not accounted for. Nagumo steps closer, his expression tightening for the first time. What types an officer asks. The answer does not come immediately. The message is incomplete, uncertain. Somewhere out there, American forces are present. But what kind? How strong? How close? The questions begin to multiply. And still there is no mention of carriers. That absence becomes the most important detail. Without carriers, the American force is vulnerable. Without carriers, Japanese air superiority remains unchallenged. Nagumo hesitates. For the first time this morning, the clarity of his plan begins to fracture. He has aircraft being rearmed for a second strike on Midway. He has torpedo planes that were originally prepared for anti-ship attacks, now partially disassembled. He has no confirmed location of American carriers, and he has limited time to act. To reverse the rearming process now would create further delay. To continue risks being unprepared if American carriers suddenly appear. The decision must be made with incomplete information. It always is. He chooses to continue. Complete the rearming, then launch. It is a decision grounded in logic and shaped by assumption. At 8 a.m., the situation grows more complex. Additional fragments of the reconnaissance report come through. The enemy force includes cruisers and destroyers. Still no confirmed carriers. Still no direct threat to the Japanese fleet. Relief, subtle but real, moves across the bridge. The earlier tension eases slightly. The Americans are present but not decisive. Not yet. But below deck, the consequences of earlier orders are reaching their peak. You can hear the metallic clang of bombs being secured beneath wings. Fuel vapors hang thick in the air. Aircraft are positioned wingtip to wingtip, tightly packed in preparation for launch. The hangar is no longer a place of order. It is a place of accumulation, potential energy waiting for release. At 8:20 a.m., another message arrives from Tone's reconnaissance plane. The delay has cost clarity. Now the words come but too late to be easily absorbed. Enemy force includes what appears to be a carrier. The bridge falls silent. For a moment, no one speaks. A carrier, not confirmed, not fully identified, but present. Everything changes. Nagumo's earlier assumptions collapse into uncertainty. The Americans are not blind. They are not absent. They are here, somewhere within striking distance. And his aircraft are not ready. They are armed for the wrong mission. Fuel lines are still connected. Bombs and torpedoes lie scattered across the hangar decks. Launch operations cannot begin immediately. They require time. Time that may no longer exist. You can feel the shift now. It is no longer confidence guiding decisions. It is pressure, urgency, the narrowing of options. Nagumo orders the rearming process halted. Reverse the changes. Prepare for anti-ship strike. But the order comes into a system already in motion. Torpedoes must be brought back. Bombs must be removed. Aircraft must be reconfigured again. Each step takes minutes. Each minute increases exposure. Above the sky remains clear. Too clear, because at this very moment, American aircraft are already approaching, low over the water, invisible against the horizon, closing the distance. On the bridge, officers scan the sky more intensely now. Binoculars sweep across empty blue. Radio operators listen for any sign of incoming attack. There is still nothing visible, nothing immediate, and yet the realization begins to take shape. The enemy has not been passive. He has not waited. He has acted. And the Japanese fleet, for the first time in months, is not ahead of the sequence. It is reacting, late. At 9:18 a.m., the first sound does not come from above. It comes from the radio. A sudden burst of static, then a strained voice cutting through the noise. Enemy aircraft approaching from bearing. The transmission breaks apart into distortion. On the bridge of Akagi, heads turn instantly. Binoculars rise. Officers lean forward, scanning the empty sky with sharpened urgency. The calm surface of the ocean stretches unbroken in every direction, sunlight glinting off gentle swells. For a few seconds, there is nothing. Then someone points. Low on the horizon, tiny shapes, moving fast. You can feel the change ripple across the deck below, even before the alarm is fully sounded. Flight deck crews freeze, then scatter into action. Mechanics drop tools. Ordnance handlers step back from half-secured bombs. Fuel hoses are yanked free, spilling drops of gasoline that evaporate instantly in the heat. The siren begins, a rising mechanical wail that cuts through engine noise and human voices alike. Enemy aircraft. The words travel faster than the sound. On the bridge, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo does not speak immediately. He watches, measures, waits for confirmation. The shapes grow larger. Not dive bombers, not high altitude. They are low, almost skimming the water. Torpedo planes. American. The first wave has found them. On the flight deck, the situation is suddenly critical. Aircraft are not ready. They are not lined for launch. They are not armed for immediate response. They are exposed. Fighters must be scrambled. Launch the combat air patrol. An officer shouts. Above. Mitsubishi. A 6M-Zeros roar into motion, engines screaming as they accelerate down the deck. One lifts into the air, then another climbing sharply to intercept. But the timing is wrong. The Japanese fighters are taking off as the American planes are already arriving. The first torpedo bombers come into full view now. Douglas TBD Devastator aircraft, heavy and slow, flying in tight formation just above the waves. You can see the strain in their approach. They are exposed. They are vulnerable. And yet they keep coming. Anti-aircraft guns open fire. The deck erupts in sharp, rhythmic bursts as tracers streak across the ski. Shells explode around the incoming planes, throwing up black puffs of smoke. The air fills with the crack of gunfire and the metallic clatter of spent casings hitting the deck. The Zeros descend on them almost immediately. Fast, agile, lethal. One Devastator bursts into flame, its wings shearing off as it spirals into the ocean. Another is torn apart, mid-air debris scattering across the water below. You can see the imbalance. The American planes are outclassed, outmaneuvered, outgunned, and still they press forward. On the bridge, an officer allows himself a tight, grim smile. "This is futile," he says quietly. It appears to confirm everything they believed. The Americans are desperate, uncoordinated, sacrificing planes for no effect. Below, the chaos intensifies. The Japanese carriers begin evasive maneuvers, turning sharply into the wind to complicate torpedo targeting. The decks tilt slightly beneath your feet as the massive ships carve through the water. Torpedoes drop. White wakes streak across the surface, cutting toward the carriers. Hard to port. The helm responds instantly. The ship turns, the torpedoes sliding past, missing by narrow margins. One after another, the attacks fail. Planes are shot down. Torpedoes miss. The ocean swallows burning wreckage. The sky clears again briefly. It feels like a victory, a confirmation. The Americans have found them, yes, but they have failed. Nagumo watches the last of the torpedo bombers fall away destroyed or retreating. His expression steadies. The threat for now seems contained. But the cost of that defense is invisible to most. The Zeros drawn down to low altitude to intercept the torpedo planes are now scattered, out of position, focused downward, not watching the high sky. And the Japanese carriers, forced into evasive maneuvers, have disrupted their own launch preparations even further. Aircraft below deck remain in disarray. Fuel lines still hang loose. Bombs are still unsecured. The system is strained, stretched thin by rapid shifts in orders and unexpected contact. At 9:45 a.m., another wave appears. More torpedo bombers, this time from a different direction. The attack repeats. Low, slow, direct. Again, the Zeros descend to meet them. Again, anti-aircraft fire fills the air. Again, American planes are cut down in flames. You can almost feel the frustration among the attacking pilots. They cannot reach effective range. They cannot deliver decisive hits. And yet, they do not turn away. One Devastator flies so low that its propeller seems to touch the surface of the ocean. It presses forward under a storm of gunfire, its fuselage riddled with holes trailing smoke. Then it vanishes in an explosion. On the bridge, the reaction is the same. Relief. Confidence reinforced. The attacks are uncoordinated, ineffective, wasteful. This is their last effort, someone says. They have nothing else. It feels true, because everything visible supports it. The sky once again begins to clear. The immediate threat appears neutralized. The carriers resume their attempts to reorganize. Prepare aircraft. Restore order. But something has changed, not in what is seen, but in what is no longer being watched. High above, beyond the focus of every gun and fighter, another group of aircraft approaches, unseen, unchallenged. Their engines are quieter at altitude, their approach angle steeper, their timing exact. On the bridge of Akagi, no one is looking up. They are looking outward, at the horizon, at the sea, at where the last threat came from. At this moment, the Japanese fleet believes it has survived the first contact, believes it has repelled the unexpected, believes the danger has passed. But the true attack has not yet begun. It is already overhead. At 10:20 a.m., the sky changes, not gradually, not with warning. One moment, the air above the carriers seems empty, washed in bright blue and scattered cloud. The next shadows begin to fall across the decks of Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. You feel it before you fully understand it. A shift in light, a presence overhead. Then the first shout erupts from the flight deck. Dive bombers, heads snap upward, and there they are. High above, almost directly overhead, dark shapes tilt downward and begin their descent. Dauntless aircraft, their wings catching the sun as they roll into steep, controlled dives. No warning siren had prepared for this. No interception had met them. They have arrived unchallenged. On the bridge, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo freezes for a fraction of a second that feels much longer. The realization hits with brutal clarity. The torpedo attacks were not the main strike. They were a distraction. The fighters are too low. The guns are oriented outward. The sky above is undefended. Anti-aircraft elevate! An officer shouts, but the timing is already lost. The dauntless dive bombers descend with terrifying precision. Air brakes deployed, they scream downward in near vertical lines, their engines howling, the sound cutting through every other noise on the deck. You can hear the whistle of falling bombs, a sound that grows sharper, louder, more final with each passing second. On Kaga, the first impact comes. A direct hit, then another, then another. Bombs tear through the flight deck, exploding in the hangar below, where aircraft sit fully fueled and partially armed. The result is immediate and catastrophic. Fire erupts not as a single flame, but as a chain reaction, each explosion feeding the next. You can see the deck buckle. You can feel the heat even from a distance. Men are thrown from their positions, some disappearing into the inferno, others staggering, burned and disoriented. On Soryu, the pattern repeats. Bombs strike in rapid succession, punching through the deck, detonating among aircraft packed tightly together. Flames surge upward through elevator shafts, turning confined spaces into furnaces. Fuel ignites. Munitions detonate. The carrier becomes a series of internal explosions, each one louder than the last. On Akagi, for a moment, it seems different. The first bombs miss. They explode in the water nearby, sending columns of spray into the air. Hope flickers. Then one bomb strikes. Just one. It penetrates near the midship area, slipping through the deck and exploding below. The effect is delayed. Then sudden, fire bursts outward, catching on fuel lines, spreading across aircraft wings, igniting everything it touches. Below deck, the earlier rearming process now reveals its true consequence. Bombs are scattered. Torpedoes lie unsecured. Fuel vapors saturate the air. The hangar becomes a single continuous ignition point. You can hear the secondary explosions begin. Sharp cracks. Deep concussions. The sound of a ship tearing itself apart from within. On the bridge, Nagumo grips the railing, his knuckles white. Around him, officers shout conflicting orders, trying to restore control, trying to impose structure on chaos. But the sequence is unstoppable. The carriers were caught at the exact moment of maximum vulnerability. Not ready to strike, not ready to defend, only ready to burn. Above, the Dauntless. Bombers pull out of their dives, climbing away as flames consume their targets. Their attack has lasted only minutes, but the result is decisive. 3 carriers, the core of the Japanese strike force, are now crippled. Kaga is engulfed. Soryu is burning uncontrollably. Akagi, though still afloat, is already lost. The deck is no longer a place of operations. It is a place of fire. Men run with hoses, attempting to contain flames that cannot be contained. Damage control teams descend into smoke-filled compartments only to be driven back by heat and explosions. You can hear screams now. Not commands, not coordination. Only human voices reacting to something beyond control. On the bridge, the scale of the disaster begins to register. Not fully, not yet, but enough. An officer speaks, his voice strained. We must launch the remaining aircraft. But there are no remaining aircraft in condition to launch. They are destroyed, burning, or inaccessible. The sequence of decisions made over the past hour now converges into a single outcome. The delayed reconnaissance, the incomplete information, the rearming process, the shifting priorities. Each choice had seemed reasonable. Each had followed logic, but together, they created the exact conditions needed for this moment. Nagumo turns his gaze across the horizon. For the first time, he is not looking for targets. He is looking for answers. Where are the American carriers? How many aircraft remain? What comes next? Because this is not the end of the attack. It is only the beginning. To the northeast, the 4th carrier, Hiryu, remains intact. For now, its aircraft are still operational. Its decks still functional. It is the last remaining offensive power in the fleet. Orders begin to shift again. Strike back. Find the enemy. Respond. But even as those orders form, the reality settles in. The initiative is gone. The sequence has been broken. For the first time in the war, the Imperial Japanese Navy is not dictating the battle. It is reacting to it, and reacting too late. At 10:30 a.m., the fires are no longer contained to compartments. They define the ships. From the bridge of Akagi, the horizon is broken by pillars. Black smoke rising from Kaga and Soryu. The sky that had been clear only minutes ago is now streaked with burning debris and drifting ash. You can smell it even above the ocean wind. Fuel, explosives, burning paint and metal. On Akagi, the deck is no longer usable. Flames push upward through elevator shafts, licking across the surface, forcing crewmen to retreat step by step. Damage control parties try to advance with hoses, but the pressure is insufficient, the heat too intense. Below, the hangar decks are lost. You can hear the explosions, still deep and irregular, as stored ordnance detonates in sequence. On the bridge, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stands in a silence that feels heavier than the noise around him. Officers continue to speak to report to suggest actions, but something fundamental has shifted. Not in the situation, in the understanding of it. Report from Kaga. An officer says, voice strained. There is a pause. No effective damage control possible. Fires uncontrollable. Another voice follows. Soryu reports similar conditions. The words do not need elaboration. The carriers are not damaged. They are destroyed in everything but the final moment of sinking. And yet no one says it directly. Not yet, because to say it would mean acknowledging something larger. That the core of Japan's naval air power has been removed in minutes. That the plan built on those carriers has collapsed. That the war itself has shifted direction. Instead, the focus turns to what remains. To Hiryu. Farther to the north, Hiryu moves through the water, untouched, its decks intact, its aircraft still ready for action. It stands now as the last functioning carrier in the strike force, the last instrument of retaliation. Vice Admiral Taman Yamaguchi commands from its bridge, his posture firm, his expression controlled. Where Nagumo now faces loss, Yamaguchi sees opportunity. The enemy has revealed itself. The American carriers must be close, and Hiryu still has the power to strike. Orders are issued with renewed clarity. Launch a counterattack. Find the American carriers. Hit them before they can strike again. On Hiryu's deck, the response is immediate. Aircraft are brought forward, engines igniting in rapid sequence. Aichi D-3. As line up for takeoff, their crews already brief their targets, still uncertain but assumed to be within reach. You can feel the urgency now, not the calm precision of earlier, but something sharper, more desperate. On Akagi's bridge, Nagumo watches the preparations from a distance he cannot close. His own ship is no longer part of the battle in any active sense. It is a command platform surrounded by fire. Signal Hiryu, he says quietly. The order carries weight. All remaining offensive capability is now concentrated in one carrier. One chance. The message is sent. Strike immediately. At 10:58 a.m., Hiryu's first wave launches. The aircraft rise into the smoke-filled sky, climbing through the haze left by the burning carriers. Their engines cut through the heavy air, steady and determined. You can see them disappear into the distance, small shapes against a sky that no longer feels secure. On the bridge of Hiryu, Yamaguchi does not hesitate. He understands the stakes. This is no longer an operation. It is a response, and it must succeed. At 12:20 p.m., the first reports come back. The strike has found a target, an American carrier. USS Yorktown. Dive bombers descend. Bombs hit. Smoke rises from the American ship. The message reaches Nagumo. For the first time since the morning began to unravel, there is a shift, a possibility. The Americans can be hurt. The balance is not entirely lost. On Hiryu, preparations begin for a second strike. This time, torpedo bombers, Nakajima B-5. An aircraft are brought forward, armed, fueled, launched in rapid sequence. The process is smoother here, more controlled, untouched by the chaos that consumed the other carriers. At 2:30 p.m., the second wave strikes. Torpedoes hit Yorktown. The American carrier slows, listing damaged heavily. Reports confirm it. The enemy has been struck twice. There is a moment, brief but real, where the narrative seems to shift again. Perhaps the loss of 3 carriers can be balanced. Perhaps Hiryu can still deliver enough damage to force the Americans back. Perhaps the outcome is not yet decided. On Akagi's bridge, the information is received in fragments. Each report brings a flicker of regained structure. But beneath it, something else remains, a silence. Because even as these successes are reported, the scale of what has already been lost cannot be undone. 3 carriers are burning. their air groups destroyed, their crews fighting fires they cannot extinguish, their role in the battle finished. The realization begins to form not as a single thought, but as a series of smaller recognitions. The force that began this operation no longer exists in its original form. What remains is a fragment, a reduced capability, dependent on one ship, one air group, one sequence of attacks. And if that sequence fails, there is nothing behind it. No reserve, no reinforcement, no second line. At this moment, no one on the Japanese side says the word defeat. No one declares the turning point, but you can feel it. In the way orders are now issued faster, in the way reports are received with more intensity, in the way every decision carries the weight of finality. The battle has changed, and even as Hiryu prepares to continue the fight, the outcome is already beginning to move beyond control. At 3:30 p.m., the smoke from 3 burning carriers still stains the sky. From the deck of Hiryu, the horizon looks different now. Not open, not controlled. It feels crowded, uncertain, filled with threats that cannot be seen but are known to exist. The earlier rhythm of launch and recovery has changed. Every aircraft that leaves now carries weight beyond its mission. It carries necessity. On the bridge, Vice Admiral Taman Yamaguchi stands beside Captain Tomio Kaku. Both men are calm in posture, but the tension is visible in their silence. Reports from the second strike against USS Yorktown have arrived. Torpedoes have hit. The American carrier is damaged, possibly crippled. Possibly, the word lingers, because there is no confirmation of sinking, no confirmation of destruction. Only damage. And in this battle, damage is not enough. We must strike again if possible, Kaku says. Yamaguchi does not respond immediately. He looks out across the water toward where the American fleet must be hidden beyond sight. He understands what the reports imply. If Yorktown still floats, it can still launch aircraft. If it can still launch aircraft, then another strike is coming. Toward them, below deck, the tempo has reached its limit. Aircraft that returned from the first and second strikes are being refueled and rearmed as quickly as possible. Crews move with urgency that borders on exhaustion. Sweat mixes with fuel residue. Hands move faster, less precise. You can hear the strain now. Voices raised. Orders repeated. Mistakes corrected in motion. There is no margin left. At 4 p.m., radar is not available to them in any meaningful sense. Detection depends on lookouts, on timing, on assumption. And assumption is failing. A lookout calls out, "Aircraft sighted." The words cut through the noise like a blade. Every head turns upward again. This time there is no delay. Shapes appear in the distance. High. Approaching. Not scattered. Not slow. Organized. You can feel the recognition pass across the bridge before anyone speaks it. The Americans have found them, again. And this time there are no other carriers to absorb the blow. No Kaga. No Soryu. No Akagi able to fight. Only Hiryu. Prepare for attack. Yamaguchi orders. The response is immediate, but constrained. Zeros scramble engines roaring as they launch into the air. But there are fewer now. Losses from earlier engagements have reduced their number. Fuel limitations restrict how long they can remain aloft. They climb, but not fast enough, not high enough. The American formation resolves into Douglas SBD, dauntless aircraft descending into position. You can see the same pattern as before, the same angle, the same precision. And this time, everyone on the bridge knows exactly what it means. Anti-aircraft guns open fire. Tracers streak upward. But the timing is already against them. The dive bombers roll over. They begin their descent. The sound returns. That same piercing mechanical scream of air and engine as the aircraft dive almost vertically toward the carrier. On the deck, there is no illusion now. No belief that this can be fully stopped. Crewmen scatter to damage control positions even before the bombs fall, as if preparing for impact before it happens might somehow lessen it. The first bomb hits. It strikes near the forward elevator, punching through the deck before detonating below. The explosion is immediate. Fire erupts upward. Aircraft on the hangar deck ignite. Fuel lines rupture. The second bomb follows, then a third. Each impact compounds the last. The deck shudders beneath your feet, a deep, violent vibration that runs through the entire structure of the ship. On the bridge, instruments shake. Glass cracks. Smoke begins to rise even here, far above the initial blasts. Yamaguchi grips the railing, his expression unchanged, but his eyes fixed on the unfolding destruction. He does not look away. Below, the hangar becomes what the others had become earlier. A confined space filled with fuel explosives and aircraft. A single ignition point multiplied across every surface. You can hear the secondary explosions begin, not as isolated sounds, but as a chain, one after another. The ship is no longer a platform. It is an event. Fire spreads rapidly, climbing through compartments, consuming everything in its path. Damage control teams attempt to respond, but the heat forces them back. Smoke fills corridors, reducing visibility to nothing. "Contain the fire," someone shouts. But there is no containment, only delay. On the bridge, reports come in fragments. Forward section ablaze. Hangar deck lost. Fire spreading aft. Each message adds to the same conclusion. Hiryu is no longer operational. And with that, the last offensive capability of the strike force is gone. For a moment there is silence, not in sound, but in understanding. Everything that could be done has been done. Every decision has been made, and still the result is this. Yamaguchi turns slightly, addressing his officers. Prepare for continued resistance. The words are formal, measured, but they carry an undertone that is impossible to ignore. There is no longer a path to victory here, only a path through the consequences. On the burning decks, crewmen continue to fight. Hoses spray water that turns instantly to steam. Explosions continue beneath their feet. The sky above clears again as the American aircraft pull away, their mission complete. The pattern repeats. But this time there is no illusion left to sustain. No belief that the next action will reverse the outcome. Only the immediate necessity of survival. And the growing awareness that survival itself may not be possible. By 5:30 p.m., the shape of the battle no longer resembles a plan. It resembles aftermath. From the distance, the four carriers that had once formed the striking core of the Imperial Japanese Navy are no longer a formation. They are separate columns of smoke, each rising into the late afternoon sky as markers of something that has already ended. Akagi burns steadily, its deck twisted and blackened. Kaga is engulfed in flame from bow to stern. Soryu lists slightly, its fires uncontrolled. And now Hiryu, the last to stand, joins them. 4 carriers, 4 centers of command, 4 air groups, all removed within hours. On the bridge of the battleship, Yamato far to the west, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto receives the reports in fragments that do not immediately form a coherent whole. Akagi heavily damaged, Kaga burning, Soryu out of action, Hiryu under attack. Each message arrives separated by minutes, by static, by uncertainty. Each one is processed individually before the pattern emerges. Yamamoto stands over the chart table, his hand resting near the position markers that had once indicated a precise and coordinated operation. Now they indicate loss. He does not speak at first. Around him, staff officers exchange glances. Their earlier confidence replaced by careful silence. No one wants to be the first to interpret what is becoming undeniable, because interpretation will lead to conclusion. And conclusion will lead to decision. Signal Nagumo Yamamoto finally says, "The order is simple, but the response that returns is not. Communications are disrupted. Radio transmissions are incomplete. The situation at the carrier group is too chaotic to produce clear reports. What arrives instead are partial confirmations. Fires uncontrollable, aircraft destroyed, operations ceased. Each phrase strips away another layer of the original plan. That plan had depended on timing, coordination, surprise. It had assumed that Japanese carriers would strike first, disable Midway, then engage and destroy any American naval response. Instead, the sequence has inverted. The American carriers struck first, and decisively. On Yamato's bridge, the realization spread slowly but completely. The First Air Fleet no longer exists as an effective fighting force. Without it, the entire Midway operation loses its foundation. The invasion force, still approaching now, has no air cover. The supporting fleets positioned for a decisive engagement now face an enemy that has already demonstrated superiority. The plan cannot continue as designed, but no immediate alternative exists. Recall the invasion force, one officer suggests. Another hesitates. Await further confirmation. The delay is not indecision. It is the result of a structure that had not anticipated this outcome. There is no prepared response for total carrier loss, only for partial damage, for tactical adjustment, not for collapse. Back at the carrier group, the reality is more immediate. On Hiryu, the fires have spread beyond control. The deck is fractured. The hangar is a continuous blaze. Crewmen continue to fight, but their efforts now focus on survival rather than recovery. Vice Admiral Taman Yamaguchi remains on the bridge. An officer approaches him. "We should abandon ship." Yamaguchi does not respond immediately. He looks across the water where the other carriers burn, where the smoke marks the positions of ships that had represented the strength of the fleet. He understands what abandoning the ship means, not just physically, but symbolically. It is the final acknowledgement that the battle is lost, and that the fleet has been broken. "Continue. Damage control," he says. The order is given without hesitation, but it is no longer a strategy. It is an act of refusal. On Akagi, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo has already transferred his flag. His ship can no longer function as a command center. The fire has reached critical systems. Communication lines are failing. He steps onto the deck of a destroyer, looking back at Akagi as flames rise higher. There is no visible anger, no outward shock, only a stillness, because the meaning of what has happened is still forming, not in words, but in absence. The absence of aircraft, the absence of coordination, the absence of control. Each carrier had been a system, a self-contained unit of power. Together, they had been overwhelming. Now those systems are gone, and nothing has replaced them. At 7 p.m., orders begin to shift more clearly. Withdraw, regroup, preserve what remains. The language is careful. It avoids the word retreat, but the action is the same. Ships begin to alter course. Distances increase. The formation dissolves. The idea of a decisive engagement fades, replaced by the necessity of survival. On Yamamoto receives confirmation. All 4 carriers are either destroyed or beyond recovery. The message is clear now. Complete. Final. He closes his eyes briefly. Not in grief, not in hesitation, but in acknowledgement. The operation has failed. Not partially, not temporarily. Completely. He opens his eyes and issues the order. Withdraw. It is spoken quietly, but it carries across the fleet. The plan that had begun with precision and confidence ends not with a final battle, but with disengagement, with distance, with silence. And as the ships turn away from Midway, leaving behind burning carriers and drifting wreckage, the realization continues to deepen. This was not a setback. It was a collapse, and nothing in the structure of the operation had been designed to survive it. Night begins to settle over the Pacific, but it does not bring relief. At 8:30 p.m., the sky above the retreating Japanese fleet darkens into deep blue, then black. The fires still burning on Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu cast a flickering orange glow that reflects off the water, turning the ocean into a shifting mirror of flame. You can still hear explosions, less frequent now, but deeper, more final. On the destroyer, Arashi sailors move quickly across the deck, preparing lines, lowering boats, pulling survivors from the water. Men covered in oil, burned exhausted, cling to ropes and are dragged aboard. Some collapse immediately. Others try to speak their voices hoarse, fragmented. Fragments of the battle travel with them. Bombs from above. No warning. Fire everywhere. No one interrupts them. No one corrects them. Because every account matches what is already known. Across the fleet, rescue operations begin in parallel. Destroyers close in around the burning carriers, maneuvering carefully to avoid debris and spreading fires. The water is filled with wreckage aircraft parts, broken sections of deck, and bodies drifting in silence. You can smell the oil on the surface. You can feel the heat still radiating from the ships. On Hiryu, the decision that had been delayed can no longer be avoided. At 9 p.m., the order is finally given. Abandon ship. Vice Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi remains on the bridge. Captain Tomio Kaku stands beside him. Around them, the structure of the ship continues to weaken metal, groaning under heat and stress. An officer approaches again. "Admiral, we must leave now." Yamaguchi looks once more across the dark water toward where the other carriers had been. Their fires are still visible, though diminished like distant signals fading into night. He understands the situation completely. There is no recovery, no return, only departure. But for him, departure is not an option. "Tell the men to go," he says. The officer hesitates, then salutes. Below, lifeboats are lowered. Crewmen climb down ropes, helping the wounded, pushing the weaker ones ahead. Some jump directly into the water, swimming toward the destroyers waiting nearby. The process is urgent, but not chaotic. It is controlled, disciplined, because even in this moment, procedure remains. Structure remains, even as the ships themselves are lost. On the deck, flames continue to spread, consuming what remains of aircraft fuel and equipment. The heat distorts the air, bending light, making the edges of everything seem unstable. One by one, the lifeboats push away. The distance grows. The ship becomes something observed rather than occupied. At 10 p.m., Yamaguchi and Kaku are still on the bridge. They have not moved. They do not signal. They do not speak. Below them, the carrier burns. Around them, the ocean reflects it. And slowly, the distance between them and the rest of the fleet becomes permanent. Elsewhere, similar scenes unfold. On Akagi, the fires have reached a point where the structure can no longer be stabilized. Damage control has failed entirely. The ship remains afloat, but only as a burning shell. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo is now aboard a destroyer, watching from a distance. Officers beside him speak in low voices, discussing what remains of the fleet, what can be salvaged, what must be abandoned. But their words feel disconnected from what they see. Because what they see is not damage, it is absence. The absence of function, the absence of power, the absence of what had defined their position in the war. At 11 p.m., orders are given that carry a different kind of finality. Destroy the carriers, not to save them, but to prevent their capture. Destroyers approach their guns, trained on ships that had once been the center of their formation. On Soryu, torpedoes are launched at close range. The impacts are heavy, deliberate, controlled. The ship lists further its structure, collapsing inward as water floods compartments already weakened by fire. On Kaga, similar actions are prepared. The decision is not emotional, it is procedural. These ships cannot be recovered, therefore they must be removed. Even in defeat, there is order. On Yamato, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto receives confirmation of the abandonment. 4 carriers, all gone. He stands alone for a moment at the edge of the bridge, looking out into the darkness where the battle had taken place. There is nothing visible now except distant light and the faint glow of burning wreckage. The ocean has already begun to reclaim the evidence, but the knowledge remains, and it cannot be removed. Around him, officers continue to work. They adjust courses, transmit signals, organize the withdrawal. The structure of command remains intact, but the purpose has changed. No longer to advance, no longer to strike, only to preserve what remains. And yet, even in these actions, there is an undercurrent. An attempt, subtle but present, to recover something intangible. Not ships, not aircraft, but control. Understanding, meaning, how did this happen? Where did the sequence fail? What decision could have been different? The questions begin to form, but no answers arrive. Because the answers are not contained in a single moment. They are spread across every choice made since the morning began, across every assumption that shaped those choices. And now, as the fleet turns away from Midway, leaving behind burning carriers and empty water, the attempt to recover what was lost continues. But it is no longer about the battle. It is about what remains after it. June 5th, 1942, 2:15 a.m. The Pacific west of Midway. The ocean is dark now, vast and indifferent, broken only by the faint wakes of ships withdrawing into the night. The fires behind them have dimmed, reduced to distant glows that flicker low on the horizon before disappearing entirely. There is no sound of battle, no engines racing for launch, no anti-aircraft fire, only the steady rhythm of ships moving away. On the bridge of the battleship, Yamato Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands alone near the chart table. The lamps cast a muted yellow light across maps that no longer represent the situation they were designed to control. The markers are still there, but they have lost meaning. 4 carrier symbols remain where they were placed earlier. No one has removed them yet. No one has replaced them, because there is no symbol for what they have become. Gone. Around him, the bridge is quieter than it has been at any point in the operation. Officers speak in low tones, if at all. Movements are deliberate, restrained, as if any unnecessary sound would disturb something already fragile. Yamamoto looks down at the chart again. He does not need new reports. He does not need confirmation. He already understands. Not in fragments, not as separate losses, but as a whole. The First Air Fleet is gone. Not damaged, not reduced. Gone as an effective force. 4 carriers, hundreds of aircraft. The majority of Japan's most experienced naval aviators, all removed in a single day. The realization does not arrive suddenly. It settles, layer by layer. Each confirmed loss adding weight until it can no longer be ignored. An officer approaches, hesitates, then speaks. Admiral, updated casualty estimates are coming in. Yamamoto nods slightly but does not look up. He does not need the numbers to understand the scale. Because the loss is not only material, it is structural. Those pilots cannot be replaced quickly. Their training had taken years. Their experience had been built across multiple campaigns. They had been the edge that made every previous victory possible. Now that edge is gone, and there is no immediate way to restore it. He straightened slightly, his gaze moving from the chart to the dark horizon beyond the bridge windows. For months, every operation had followed a pattern. Japan strikes first. The enemy reacts. The outcome is decided quickly. That pattern is broken, not partially, completely, and with it the assumption that had supported every strategic decision, that Japan could dictate the tempo of the war. That assumption no longer holds. On a nearby table, a radio operator adjusts his headset, listening to distant transmissions. Fragments of communication continue to arrive from scattered ships, confirming positions, reporting survivors, coordinating withdrawal. Each message is routine, but taken together they form a different picture, not of a battle in progress, but of a force reorganizing after loss. Yamamoto finally speaks. Signal all units to maintain distance and regroup. The order is simple, but its meaning is not. There will be no renewed engagement, no attempt to reassemble an offensive. The focus is no longer on Midway or on the American fleet. It is on what remains. Preservation, containment, time. On the destroyers trailing behind, the human cost is more visible. Men sit along the decks wrapped in blankets, their uniforms burned or soaked with oil. Some stare out at the water in silence. Others speak in fragments, recounting moments that still feel unreal. The bombs came from above. We did not see them. There was no time. A sailor grips the railing, his hands trembling slightly. They were already there. No one contradicts him. Because that is what it felt like. That the attack had appeared from nowhere. That the sequence had skipped a step. That something essential had been missed. On another ship, officers begin to reconstruct the timeline. Reports are laid out, times noted, movements tracked, the delayed reconnaissance from Tone, the decision to rearm, the incomplete sighting reports, the torpedo attacks drawing fighters down. the dive bombers arriving unopposed. Each element is clear on its own, but together they form something more. A chain, not of mistakes, but of assumptions. Assumptions that had held true before, that no longer hold now. On Yamato, Yamamoto listens as one of his staff officers outlines part of this sequence, carefully, without assigning blame, only describing. Yamamoto nods once. He does not interrupt. He does not correct. Because the explanation does not change the outcome. It only clarifies it. And the clarity brings with it something else. Finality. There is no immediate way to recover what has been lost. No reserve fleet waiting to replace the carriers. No trained air groups ready to step in. The balance of power in the Pacific has shifted. Not completely. Not yet. But enough. Enough that future operations will not resemble past ones. Enough that every decision from this point forward will be made under different conditions. At 4 a.m., the first light of dawn begins to touch the horizon. A thin line of gray appears separating sea from sky. It reveals nothing new. No enemy ships, no returning aircraft. Only the empty space where the battle had taken place. Yamamoto watches the light grow. He does not speak, because there is nothing left to decide about this battle. Only what comes after. And what comes after will be shaped by what has already been lost. June 5th, 1942. 7:40 a.m. The Pacific west of Midway. The sun rises over an ocean that appears unchanged. Calm water, clear sky, long, steady swells moving in quiet rhythm. If you did not know what had happened here, you would see nothing unusual. But beneath the surface, the evidence remains. Aircraft wreckage sinks slowly into the depths. Twisted metal, shattered wings, engines that will never turn again, and with them, the men who had flown them. The ocean closes over everything without resistance. On the retreating Japanese ships, the silence has deepened. It is no longer the silence of confusion. It is the silence of completion. The battle is over, and nothing more will be added to it. On the bridge of the battleship, Yamato Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands facing forward, his posture unchanged, his expression controlled. Reports are still arriving. Final confirmations. Final numbers. Final positions. Each one reduces uncertainty. Each one increases clarity. 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, all lost. Not disabled. Not temporarily out of action. Lost. The words are recorded formally, but they carry weight beyond documentation, because each of those ships had represented more than steel and machinery. They had carried trained air groups, experienced commanders, operational systems refined through months of success. Their loss is not isolated. It is cumulative, and it cannot be replaced quickly. A staff officer reads from a report. Estimated aircraft losses exceed 200. Another follows. Pilot casualties significant. Many experienced aircrew unaccounted for. The phrasing is precise, measured, but the implication is clear. The loss of pilots cannot be corrected with production. Aircraft can be built. Pilots must be trained, and training requires time that does not exist in the same way anymore. Yamamoto listens. He does not interrupt, because the numbers do not surprise him. They confirm what he already understands. The advantage Japan had held at the beginning of the war was not only numerical, it was qualitative. Experience, coordination, timing. That advantage has been reduced, not gradually, but suddenly. On a nearby chart, new markings are being added, not for attack, not for advance, but for defensive positioning. Future operations will require different assumptions, different pacing, different risk. The structure of the war has shifted, and it will not return to what it was. On the deck below, sailors move more slowly now. There is work to be done. Maintenance, reorganization, preparation for the next phase. But the urgency that had defined earlier movements is gone, replaced by something heavier, more deliberate. On one side of the deck, a group of survivors from Hiryu sit together wrapped in blankets, their faces marked by smoke and exhaustion. One of them speaks quietly. "We thought we had them." No one responds immediately, because the statement is not a question, it is a memory. a reflection of what had been believed only hours earlier. Another sailor looks out across the water. They were waiting. Again, no one answers, because there is nothing to correct. The understanding has already settled. Across the fleet, similar conversations occur. Short, fragmented, without resolution. Not because the men do not want answers, but because the answers are already present in what has happened. The Americans had not been where they were expected to be. They had not responded in the anticipated way. They had not been slower, or weaker, or disorganized. They had been prepared, positioned, and precise. And the Japanese fleet had encountered that reality too late to adjust. On Yamato's bridge, Yamamoto turned slightly, looking once more at the chart. The markers that had represented the First Air Fleet are no longer there. They have been removed. In their place, there is empty space. It is not filled, because nothing can replace what they represented. An officer steps forward. Admiral, recommendations for future operations. The question is formal, necessary. It belongs to what comes next. Yamamoto considers it for a moment, then speaks. We will proceed with caution. The words are simple, but they carry a different weight now. Caution had not defined earlier operations. Speed had. Initiative had. Confidence had. Now those elements must be reconsidered. Not abandoned, but adjusted, because the conditions that had supported them no longer exist in the same way. At 10 a.m., the fleet continues its withdrawal. The distance from Midway increases. The horizon behind them becomes empty. No smoke, no visible trace of what had occurred. Only memory, and record, and consequence. On the ships, routines begin to re-establish themselves, not as before, but as something altered, quieter, more measured. Each action now carries an awareness that had not been present at the beginning of the operation. That outcomes are not fixed, that assumptions can fail, that timing can reverse, and that once a sequence breaks, it cannot always be restored. By midday, the ocean has fully reclaimed the surface. There is no visible sign of battle, only open water stretching in every direction. On Yamamoto remains at his post, still, composed, watching the horizon that offers nothing back. Because the battle has ended. The carriers are gone. The air groups are gone. The plan is gone. And what remains is not what had been intended. It is what is left.